Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm ready to do one of my very favorite things. Tell people why they're wrong about stuff. It's literally one of my favorite things in the world. And it's great because I'm never wrong about anything, and I've never been proven wrong about anything on this show ever. So when you're batting thousands, it's the kind of thing that you really cherish.
Well, doesn't it get old by this point? Like, aren't you tired of it?
You'd think so. And I understand why you can't really relate, but this is the kind of thing that you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I don't know what to tell you.
Because on the opposite end, it does get tiring being wrong all the time. So I can relate on it's different levels, but that's not a bad idea for like a podcast. Just telling people like whatever subject it is, you bring on somebody like, hey, I read your book. Thank you for coming on. I really respect what you do, but now I'm going to spend the next half hour telling you everything that's wrong with what you've written. I think that would be a.
I think you just invented cable TV news. I think that's what you just invented there. That's.
Boom.
I think that's been tried. I find it lacking personally, but that's just me.
That's just you, and only you.
And we know I'm right about everything, so therefore, QED.
Wow. All right, Tom. Thank you. I do appreciate you bringing your knowledge and your thoughts to the show, because this show is where we are taking on the detractors of the 12 team expansion, and we are both pro expansion, but we're not just going to belittle these thoughts. Now, Tom, we haven't really talked. Would you have preferred an 8 team rather than a 12 team?
I as of 2 weeks ago when they were talking about this, I thought 8 teams was probably a good place to land. And I would not mind at all an 8-team playoff. I do think there are some advantages to 12. The fact that the teams below 4 have an additional hurdle to clear, that helps maybe, it makes it more difficult for a team that is, less deserving or whatever to sneak in. It helps improve the value of the regular season, that you need to be a regular season conference champion to get that bye. There's a lot to the way they did it that I thought was pretty well done. We spent most of the last show bashing them about all the dumb stuff that they did in there that was wrong. There was a lot in this that I thought was like, oh, that was really well thought out, and that's a good way to do it. And we can get into a bunch of that stuff later. But yeah, I thought on the whole, I think I have talked myself into the fact that 12 is better than 8.
That's where I am as well. And I didn't expect that. But when they explained why 12 is better than 8, I'm like, well, okay, that makes sense. And the inclusion and having more teams with the opportunity, and we'll get into to some of that stuff. So we didn't talk about on the last show about how we felt about the 8 versus 12. I would also been good with 6, because that was also, another thing where you get a first round bye for the top 2, and there's some built-in things there. But I do prefer the 12 over the 8, because I think it's going to be pretty cool. And maybe I'm wrong, but Tom, do you also think it's going to be cool? Because then I'll know if I'm going to be wrong.
I do think it is going to be pretty cool, because you know what I like watching? High stakes college football. That I actually enjoy watching that quite a bit, and I think we're going to get more of it. So therefore, I think it's a good thing.
Well, let's go. That takes us to the first point from the detractors, is that it lessens the importance of the regular season, because teams can lose multiple games and still make the playoffs by winning the conference. And so you are saying you want more high stakes college football. What some people believe is that this reduces that, because a loss doesn't mean anything anymore. And I will say, Tom, losses right now, as they stand, a loss really doesn't mean anything anyway. So it's that second loss that is a concern, and it will still be a concern. Now, there will be some 3-loss teams that make the playoffs, because I was, going through a little bit ago and seeing how many were ranked in the top 10, top 12, and it happens every year. Almost every year, there's some 3-loss teams in there. So that is going to happen. But the idea that the importance of the regular season is going to be diminished, I disagree with it, because the entire regular season now has more importance all across the country for every team. And also, losses have been part of the playoffs forever. Of the 28 teams that have made the playoffs in the 7 years, 17 had losses. So only 11 undefeated teams have made the playoffs. So let's not act like losses are the end of like the chances or the purity of the game.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting as we were kind of discussing this on our message board was the number of people who looked at 2017 and 2018 Ohio State as like, well, that team was deeply flawed and they lost a game, and so therefore like they shouldn't be in because they lost a game. And it's like, well, the 2014 team, were they also deeply flawed because they lost to a 6-16 by 2 touchdowns at home? Was that? It's like, well, no, that's different. Like, well, is it though? Because you're making individual games potentially mean less. Like if Ohio State gets into the Michigan game undefeated and they've already clinched the Big Ten East, then sure, they could lose that Michigan game, still win the Big Ten, and still get a first round bye. Sure. How often is that going to happen? Probably not that often. But you're also making all of these other games. So you're going to have individual games that maybe mean less. There are so many more games that are going to mean more. Every non-Power 5 game is going to mean more. Every Pac-12 game after September 30th or October 15th, when you have a team that has, the Pac-12 champion has lost a game or two, every Pac-12 game right now is meaningless. I think Ohio State fans are looking at this from the Ohio State perspective, not necessarily from the college football perspective. I think nationally, you're going to have a lot more games that mean a lot.
And you've seen some of the drastic things that the Pac-12 has done to be part of the national picture in terms of we will play at 9 a.m. just so people can watch us and acknowledge that we exist. This also accomplishes that, and it makes the sport more national, and it stops the regionalization, which is happening where you've got the Southeast, and that's where the ratings are great. In the Midwest, the ratings are great. Everywhere else, it's, there's some issues out West and things like that where it could stand to be better. And you've seen dips in the California teams. Playoffs could help them get back to that. And I know Ohio State fans said, why is that? That's not a good thing to have the California teams being better and Texas teams being better. This isn't a good thing for Ohio State. That particular may not be, but it's still best for the sport. And Tom, I was thinking about this. When was the last time a major change in college football was bad for Ohio State? Maybe the expansion of the reduction of scholarships, or maybe the BCS.
Yeah, I mean the reduction,
1998 team.
Yeah, I mean the 1998 team probably wouldn't have been won under the old system anyway. So, yeah, I think the scholarship reduction is probably the answer, and that kind of hurt the whole top level of the sport all at once. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple reasons to think this might actually be really good for Ohio State. One is there was someone, and now I'm forgetting who. I credited him on the Tuesday or the Monday Morning Scoop, and now I can't remember who it was, but someone wrote and went back and figured out every year from 2012 on who would have made the college football playoff. Ohio State would have missed it in 2012 because of the bowl ban. Every other year they would have been in. So 2013 to the present, they're in the playoff every single year. What are the odds that they win one national championship or greater in that? I would say fairly high. The 2014 team has one extra game to play. But then you also have the 2015 team, which is pretty darn good. 2019 team, which is pretty darn good. The 2020 team, which is pretty darn good. I mean, you're probably winning I'm going to set an over-under at 1.5 national championships there. That's probably about right. That is half of a national championship than Ohio State has. And if you go back through the last 50 years, say, go back to the 1970s or the Super Softs in 1968, whatever you want to go back to, 50 years or so, there's basically no college football program that has been more consistently a top 10, top 12 kind of team than Ohio State. Ohio State probably makes the playoff I haven't gone back and done the individual year by year. They probably make the playoff 30 to 35 times out of the last 50 years. I don't know if there's anyone outside of maybe Oklahoma who was that consistent over that big of a span of time. It's really the 80s, kind of mid to late 80s, they miss it, and early 90s, they miss it. And you've got the Cooper to Tressel transition a few years there. 2011, they miss it. They probably make the playoff basically every year under Tressel, every year under Meyer, a bunch of those years under Cooper. Basically the entire 1970s, they're in the playoff every year. I mean, I don't know if there's a team that benefits more in terms of making the playoff than Ohio State. And okay, let's go back to 1968. Over that last 50 years, Ohio State's won 2 national championships. if they're in the college football playoff 35 times, do you think they win more or less than 2 national championships, Tony? I already know the answer because I'm always right, Tony. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, no, they definitely win more. The argument against what you're saying, Tom, is, well, it's where's the drama? If I know Ohio State is going to be in the playoffs, that takes away the drama. How I have a problem with this line of thinking, because you want the Buckeyes in the playoffs, and so are you saying, like, without the drama there, and there will still be drama because you are going to be watching the games and rooting for them, would it make you happier if they didn't make the playoffs and there was some drama, like, oh man, but at least I feel something, like you just want to feel something.
That's why Ohio State fans go back and watch 2017 Iowa and 2018 Purdue games so much. It was just because, like, remember the drama that this led to? I mean, it's why they're two of Ohio. I mean, Big Ten Network shows them constantly on classic Ohio State game days. It's because they know everyone in Columbus would love to watch those games again.
And I think there is still going to be drama, and but exactly how much drama is there even right now with Ohio State in the regular season anyway? Not a lot. When you look at the schedule every year, you're like, okay, well, there's how many of those games can you actually lose? 2 tops on a yearly basis, 1.5. Where it's like, well, they would really have to play poorly to lose this, or because they're going to be nearly a 10-point favorite every single game this year, if they aren't already. And so, like, the drama of a regular season has gotten to the point where it's not all that dramatic because you are already putting yourself in the playoffs mentally. So
yeah, I'm with you. I don't have any kind of issue with the fact that this is, Ohio State's going to make it every year, and that makes it less dramatic. Like, I think people need to just enjoy college football for what college football is. Because you're right. Like, you go into this fall and it's like, how much drama is there surrounding this fall's Rutgers game? Really? I mean, really, you go through the schedule. I mean, I'm going to do this off the top of my head, and I'm undoubtedly going to miss someone, but Minnesota, Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue. I mean, you could probably tick off 8, maybe 9 games that are, there's functionally no way Ohio State's going to lose that game. Oregon's going to be, Oregon's like, oh, that'll be a game. I think Ohio State's favored by 10 or 11 there. Penn State, okay, Ohio State's probably favored by 10 to 12 points there. Michigan, Ohio State's probably favored by 10 to 12 points there. It's just like the way college football is right now, there is just not a lot of drama around any individual Ohio State football game. Even now, like, there's just, they can only lose 1 game to make the college football playoff. Well, they'd have to blow 2 games as double-digit favorites to not make the college football playoff then. So how much drama are we really talking about here? So yeah, I don't put a ton of stock in that one. But here's the other thing. College football has not been like this forever. This is how it is now. This is how it's been the last 8 years or so since Urban Meyer got to Ohio State. That is not how it was in the 2000s under Jim Tressel. Yeah, they won the Big Ten a bunch, but they didn't win the Big Ten every year. And it is not, the fact that this has been this way the last 5 to 8 years is not a guarantee that it will be like that for the next 10 to 15 years. Like, stuff changes in college football. And while Ohio State has been the most consistent program in probably the country at a really high level, it's not, the line does move. Sometimes the line dips down to 10. Like, there will be a time in this decade or next when Ohio State is losing 2 to 3 games annually every year. And, people are tearing their hair out, and, maybe still they make the college football playoff. Maybe they don't, but oh boy, won't you enjoy the drama then?
Yeah, exactly. Be careful what you ask for. So the next one, teams are going to sit starters. And for me, I've seen people on Twitter and on the message board where, like, so Ohio State's going to sit starters against Michigan. No, Alabama's not going to sit starters against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. You're not going to sit starters in major games at the end of the season now you may sit starters. Alabama may sit starters against the Citadel in the second to last week of the season. That's fine. And if I'm just thinking as a guy who likes to watch college football, you're going to sit starters and then start the next wave of college football guys. Sure, I don't care. Bring that on. Like, say this happens in 2023. Ohio State is going to sit Kyle McCord. So you know who's starting this week? Quinn Ewers. Oh, darn. We get to watch Quinn Ewers a year early. Sign me up. I don't. If you want to rest starters, do it. Do it at your own peril. But I'm okay with watching the next wave of young college football stars. That's the best thing about college football is just the wave of talent that keeps coming.
And I don't really buy that they're really going to sit starters anyway, because it's not like, I mean, Alabama, it's not like Alabama's second string couldn't beat the Citadel by 50 anyway, right. And they're not sitting their starters now. The starters play a quarter and a half, and then they sit them. They play a quarter and a half. It's 35-0 with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter or second quarter, and then they sit them, and that's fine. Like that's Ohio State does the same thing. Like that's what the Akron game is going to be this year. Like it's going to be 35-0 in the second quarter, and then they're going to put in the backup the backup quarterbacks and let some of the younger offensive linemen play it, and like that. Yeah, sure, that is part of the thing. You don't see Ohio State even now, sitting, go back a couple of years to, I don't know, who was the worst team they played in 2018? Did they play? They played Bowling Green in like 2016, I think, and beat them 77-10 or something like that. Guess what? JT Barrett started that game. It wasn't like, this was JT Barrett's, third season as a starter. They didn't sit JT Barrett and just get Joe Burrow some experience or Dwayne Haskins some experience. They played JT Barrett. It's the same thing. You're not going to sit guys. Like, I think people are looking at this like, oh no, these games are meaningless. Teams are going to be willing to like hand wave a loss. Like, no. Nick Saban is never okay with losing and just like, well, we'll just keep everyone fresh. Like, no. That is never the choice they're going to make.
No, the other one that is kind of relating to that, teams will throw a game to get that extra home game to avoid, like Alabama. They'll try to manipulate their way around the playoffs. And for me, I don't think having a bye week is something you would throw away in order to get a home game and an extra game. So I don't expect that to happen. And I don't expect teams to lose on purpose to avoid Alabama, because if you lose, you may avoid the playoffs. Like you better be careful. And if you're an undefeated team, then maybe you avoid Alabama. But you still have to be careful what you're doing. And again, be careful what you wish for in terms of losing on purpose, because you have no idea exactly what's going to happen. And again, it's just not something that we see in this game. And of course, people will say, well, now you will, because there's this big change and now you're going to allow it. There's so much that goes into each game that, if you want to go ahead and lose a game on purpose, just be careful what happens after that. And it will only take one time where somebody loses on purpose and something bad happens, and every other coach is like, well, I learned from other coaches. I learned from watching them do stupid stuff, and I know not to do that. And the coaches are very much like of a feather. And so like how hard it is to see, how hard it's been for coaches to like, we want to be more aggressive on fourth downs. And it's taking decades for them to get out of that shell. All it takes is one screw up. That's another reason why they won't do it. That's why they don't go for two, because it's like, we don't even want to take the chance that something bad will happen.
Well, and you think about the amount of time that these players put in, spring, winter workouts, mat drills, spring football, summer workouts, fall camp, play all season, play your conference championship, and you're going to throw a regular season game against, Ohio State's going to punt a regular season game against Michigan intentionally to set up a better potential playoff. What? Like, what? No, that is absolutely not going to happen. Like, that's the people in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center are going to care about the Michigan game and want to win the Michigan game every single year. I'm not, you may not get to talk to them as much as we do, but I can assure you they genuinely would like to win that Michigan game every single year. That's actually a pretty big thing in that program. They also have banners for winning conference championships. They get nice rings when they win conference championships. That's a thing that the players actually enjoy. I mean, I guess I haven't really asked directly, do you enjoy winning conference championships? But they seem to be smiling up on the stage like they've achieved something that they've worked very hard for all year. I think that's still going to matter. You think about NFL teams tanking at the end of the season to get a draft pick. It's like the players on the field are still playing hard. They might have bad players out there, but the players on the field are still playing hard. Like, they are still trying to win the game. And that's teams where they're directly incentivized and they have nothing on the line. They have no playoff games on the line. They have it's like they're directly incentivized to lose. And still you see teams win games in those situations because the players are still trying. Like, you can't, these are very, very high level athletes, very, very high level coaches. They have it hard coded into their brains that like winning is a super important thing. We want to win. And, you are not going to tank a game to change your seeding. And like, Ryan Day does not care about Ohio State's direct football revenue from an extra home game. Like that is not something that he's going to be willing to punt a win over. He's getting paid to win football games, not to, check ticket revenue.
It would be interesting if Ryan Day would go up to Quinn Ewers and say, "Hey, we're going to have you sit out this week because we don't need you." And Ewers is like, "But I've got a big shampoo campaign going on right now. I can't afford to miss this game. I need to be out there. I need people to see me. You're hurting my image by taking me out of the game." So there's also, I'm half joking, but that's also in play as well. Now, this is one that we talked about on the last show, and we both agree, like, it would be nice to have the quarterfinals on campus. And so one of the detractors here is that it costs too much for fans to travel to 3 playoff games. And I don't necessarily even buy that. It's a lot for the same fan to travel 3 times. But this isn't meant for the same fan to travel 3 times. It's meant for all fans to be able to go if they can. You figure there's 3 games. We won't even count the Big Ten championship game because we've already shown Ohio State fans will travel to 3 neutral site games. They do that. They've done it in 2014. They did it last year. But in terms of, say, these 3 playoff games, you're thinking you're going to get maybe 35,000 seat tickets per game. All told, that's 105,000 seats for your fan base spread over 3 games. Ohio State seats 105,000 fans in every game at home. So, like, the numbers, even like that, there's fans who have never been able to go to the games, never been able to go to the bowl games because they can't get those tickets. And so now you've got people saying, well, I can't afford to go to all 3. Good, go to 2. That leaves 1 game available for somebody else. And so to me, it works itself out. You don't have to go to every game. And it's not meant for you to go to every game. If you want to go to every game, then you're going to have to pay up for it. This is college football long ago left the little guy, like left poor Jimmy and Joe and, the $12 tickets and the Cracker Jacks. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. And so I don't want to hear about, oh, poor guys can't even afford to go to, it's going to be so expensive to go to LA and then New Orleans and then Dallas. Like, yeah, it's expensive enough just to go to LA. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. College football postseason, and I am strongly in favor of them having campus sites for the quarterfinals. So you do still just have 2 trips like that. That it would be, for any number of reasons, a far preferable solution. But yeah, I mean, there's just that it impacts a relatively small number of people. Like, I mean, yes, Ohio State fans travel like locusts to bowl cities in a way that basically no one else does, no other fan base does, outside of maybe a few in the SEC. But that's a very small percentage of the fan base. So, and a lot of the people who do are, high enough net worth income folks that, 2 versus 3 is not necessarily a deal breaker. I mean, I watched an awful lot of Ohio State football for an awful lot of years, and outside of games I was getting paid to travel for work, I think I've been to 1 Ohio State bowl game. Other than that, I went to, and you know what, I think I was working for that one too. So yeah, I don't think I've ever been to an Ohio State bowl game that I wasn't getting paid for. Like that's like, it's expensive. It is a luxury, and not everyone can do it. So that in and of itself is not necessarily a reason not to do it, but they shouldn't do it because it would be, it's going to be a better experience for everyone. It's going to be more of a home field advantage for, if Ohio State can play in the Horseshoe against LSU and have 95,000 Ohio State fans and 10,000 LSU fans there, and it's going to be 38 degrees on January 1st, like, yeah, that's a big advantage. You want to make the regular season mean more? There you go. There's your answer, Fishbowl. Do that. Like that's a, that is going to directly, and you want teams to want to win. You want to make sure no one's opting out. Like, there you go. Do that.
And who knows? They could come back and say, let's do that. That could be one of the alterations they make. I don't expect it to be, given the connection with the Bulls and the administrators and all of the decision makers, but there are some alterations that could be made. Another of the detractors say this doesn't benefit the players. Like, you're asking them to play 17 games or 15 games or 16 games. This doesn't benefit them. The thing about it is, Tom, though, as we were on the conference call with Bob Bowlesby and all of these guys, and they're saying like 3% of the players now make the playoffs in football compared to 24% of college basketball players. Now, when you consider it's not 3% of the players, really, when you think about how since the implementation of the playoffs, and you figure Alabama has made it 6 times. So that's probably like 2 full Alabama rosters, I would say, and like 2 full Clemson rosters. And so when you do all of this like intricate math, which I can do, you're not talking 3%. You're talking like less than 8% of players that will actually been in the playoffs and made the playoffs. And it's probably closer to like 0.7% of players that have played college football in the last 7 years who have actually made the playoffs. This will triple it basically from like 3% in a given year to 9%. So when you're asking this doesn't benefit the players, it benefits a lot more players by being able to do this. Yes, there's a possibility that 2 teams will have to play 17 games. That is unlikely to happen. And yes, some teams will have to play 16. You know what Hawaii does at times, Tom? They play 15 just willy-nilly. Like, yeah, let's play 15 this year. We got a conference championship game. We've got some crazy other game. Let's do it. And you don't hear any peeps about, I think Hawaii is playing too many games. Those poor Hawaii kids.
Yeah, but they get to live in Hawaii, so they have that going for them. I mean, I am very sympathetic to the concerns about the health and the wear and tear on people. Mm-hmm. I think you just lop a regular season game off, and that solves a lot of it. You lop a regular season game off, and again, in order to get to 17, you've got to play 12 regular season games and your conference championship game, and then you have to be in the first round of the playoffs, and then you have to go all the way to the national championship game. How many times is that going to happen? Probably. I mean, that's probably not realistically. Probably not going to happen more than twice a decade, maybe. So, now it's 16 games. Well, right now they're playing 15. So, okay, let's lop a regular season game off. And, removing the Tulsa game from the schedule is not a 1-to-1 apples to apples with the amount of physical, taxing that goes onto a person's body if they're playing Clemson in the playoff versus Tulsa during the regular season. Like, that's not a 1-to-1. But let's say it's half of let's say it's half of the game. So now you're at 15.5 instead of 15. Like that at that point, like I can kind of live with that, especially now that the NIL stuff is coming through. That also makes me a lot more comfortable with that, because I think I'm probably pretty pro player rights, and I think I've probably established that over the last 4 years or so on the show. Now that you're getting NIL, I'm a lot more open to the idea that this is not just the NCAA folks making a lot of money off of the backs of unpaid labor. Like this is now something that I'm probably a little more comfortable with, because guess what? If you're winning a bunch of college football playoff games, guess what that's going to do to your NIL, value? Probably increase it substantially. So that's another thing that probably makes this a little more palatable to me than it otherwise might have been.
I don't think there's any chance that they're going to lop off the game in the regular season, though, based on altering the entire 128, 130 teams for the benefit of like 6 playoff teams that would have to, it's just too many. And plus that home gate, Ohio State doesn't want to give that up, even for even for a playoff opportunity or they're not going to give up money. Once they get it, like once it was 9, then it was 10, then it was 11, then it was 12. We've never gone backwards, and I wouldn't expect that to happen here. I had another thought before I had to correct you, Tom.
I didn't say that's what they were going to do. I was just saying that's what they should do. No, that is a potential solution.
That is the easiest solution. And the fact that it is the easiest solution is exactly why it's not going to happen, because it's an easy fix. You know what? Let's just go back to 11. And teams that, we're like Tulsa, and I use Tulsa as an example a lot. Like Tulsa's probably not going to make the playoffs. If you want to go ahead and schedule a 12th game, go ahead. But the one of the questions I wanted to ask on that call, that teleconference was, and it finally did get asked at the end, like, does this NIL stuff make you feel better about asking these players to do that? And I believe their comment was, well, we never really thought about that, which is a lie because they absolutely, well, yeah, we can ask more of them. They're going to be making money. Like there's no longer this unpaid, you can't say unpaid labor type of stuff anymore. So it is okay to ask more of them. And, they're scratching each other's backs at this point. And as Urban Meyer has told Ohio State players, use the school, just like all of these players, use the playoffs. And I think a lot of them will, because they will have agents telling them to do that.
Yeah, and they're going to be participating in the games, which will be great because then they get seen, they get their NIL stuff, but also like, hey, they're playing in the games. The games are more entertaining. The games are more important. The games are, I mean, like all of these things are good. And yeah, I mean, then you're actually the people who are doing the work and taking the risk, assuming the risk and all of that, like then they're the ones who are benefiting a little more directly from it. So that seems good.
Yeah, and so this is, for me, this is better for college football as a whole, everybody. It's better for Cincinnati. It's better for even Bowling Green, who back in Urban's day, like if he had stayed there 3 or 4 years, who knows what he could have done there if you put that forward. And does it hurt Ohio State? It makes things maybe a little bit more difficult because more talent could be staying home at other places because those programs now have an opportunity to play for a national title. But I mean, now you just have to compete with that. Like do it. I mean, that's how it used to be. And so compete against that now. And I get why some Ohio State fans are against this, because why change anything when things are going so well? And I understand that because but the playoffs have only worked out for Ohio State once, so let's not pretend like it's some grand best answer, because every year the Buckeyes don't win at all, there are people upset about it, like, and think that season was a disappointment, especially last year. Based on everything they did, they were able to make it to the championship game. And yet there's a lot of people who are unhappy with that because of the way it ended. And there's just so much value or so much placed on winning that final championship game that I don't think the argument of you're ruining the regular season is all that valid, because you have already dismissed the regular season by placing all of the value in that final game. So that's where I am on that.
Yeah. And I mean, just to look at college football on the whole, how much of the narrative and discussion around college football in October every year is centered around the college football playoff? Like it's like 90% of the conversation. A team like Pitt, as soon as they lose their second game, or really their first game, like you never see them discussed unless they're getting clobbered by Clemson. And then it's in the context of, look at what Clemson did. This will help their college football playoff chances. That is honestly not good for the health of the sport, especially when you have the same like 6 teams in the conversation every year. Like I am sympathetic to the idea that this is not a great thing for Ohio State. I disagree with it. I think Ohio State is, again, potentially benefits more from this than just about any other program on a kind of like a longer historical horizon that we're looking at here. But I think that 125 teams in the country have basically, if I give you, I'll take 5 teams. I will give you the other 125, and I will pick the national champion this year. Would you take that? I mean, not a chance. It might be 4. It might be 3. You shouldn't have a sport where, what is that? We just did the 3% math, like 3% of the sport. I'll take those 3%. And you can have the other 97%. And there's not a chance in the world you would take that bet.
Where's the drama in that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Where is the drama? And that's an awful lot of regular season games that apparently don't have any meaning under the current system. This was something I was really getting into it with some people on the board, not like angrily, but just in conversation earlier in the week. There are functionally half of the sport, the non-Power 5 conferences right now start the season with realistically about a 0.000% chance of even getting the opportunity to play for the playoffs. Like maybe Cincinnati, if everything goes right and they win a couple road games against big power teams, maybe they might sneak in if some other stuff goes wrong for a bunch of other Power 5 conference champions. Maybe. And that's only if, the SEC runner-up doesn't also get in because, Georgia just beat them in the Peach Bowl last year. So obviously the SEC teams are, functionally half of the sport starts the season with 0% chance of winning without an opportunity to win. That's broken. That's wrong. That's like this is like in baseball. If it was just like the only teams that can make the playoffs are the teams from the Eastern divisions and the Western divisions. So everyone in the Central division, like, have fun with your season. It'll be cool. Like, enjoy your nights at the ballpark. It's great. It's a fun, fantastic tradition. But, you guys, I mean, like, we know, you don't play the other divisions very much, but I think we all know, like, hey, the quality of the competition in the Eastern division, the Western divisions are just so much better. We all know what would happen if the Central teams would let them in the playoffs. So you're not going to play. You're just not going to be in the playoffs anymore. I mean, how would Reds and Indians fans feel about that? Like, you have a great team, you win 100 games. And it's like, well, but I mean, your quality of competition in the Central, like we all know what would happen if you played the teams in the East. Like, come on, you just go play in your bowl games. You go play we'll give you some exhibition games in Florida. You get a trip down to Florida or to Arizona for a nice, I mean, you're welcome, by the way. We'll put them on TV. It'll be great. Like, no one would settle. No, that's crazy. There's no other sport that does that. And, yes. What is the likelihood that a team from the SWAC wins the NCAA men's basketball tournament? Close to zero. But they're in. If they get hot and they win 6 games, they can win it. Like, that's a thing. Every college basketball team theoretically starts the season with a chance to win. Every college football team does not. And that is real messed up. And, like, I know Ohio State fans, this is a million miles from anything Ohio State fans are typically thinking about on a general fall Saturday, but there are an awful lot of fan bases that stand to benefit from this and, have at least a realistic path to the playoff, a realistic path to the championship now. That is a good thing for college football on the whole.
College football has the best regular season in all of sports, as long as you are not part of the Hunger Games of the group of 5 who are, like, out in the woods, because their regular season is, meaningless in the grander scheme of things. But as long as you're in the Power 5 with the powdered wigs and all of that stuff, then yes, this is the greatest regular season in all of sports. I don't think that's going to be changing by letting others in. But that should do it for us, Tom. Do you have anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, I did. You had one note in here about that this is an easy path for Notre Dame as one of the objections, which is like, but the thing where they can't ever be a top 4 seed unless they join a conference. So then they have to win 4 playoff games. The objection is that it's too easy for them if they have to automatically win 4 playoff games every year. Go back and tally up how many college football playoff and BCS games and New Year's 6 games they've won since January 1st, 1994. I'll give you a hint. You're not going to need any fingers to count them up. So maybe they'll rip off 4 in a row, maybe, but survey says probably not. So yeah, of all of the objections, that was the one that I was like, I don't think you read the proposal, because that was actually one of the things that I thought was pretty delightful. Like, okay, you want to be your special independent snowflakes, because that's an important thing to you. Go to town, have fun, but you can't ever be one of the top 4 seeds because you can't be a conference champion.
And you know what? If they win 4, congratulations, you are the national champions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the
you
thing.
Earned
like,
it.
That's the thing. People are complaining about the fact that, you might have an undeserving champion. It's like, if you are the 10 seed and you beat the number 7 team, and then you beat the number 2 team, and then you beat the number 1 team, like, congratulations, you have the best resume of anyone in the country. And during the old days, that was enough to get you a national championship. So I think this is one of those problems that sort of solves itself. Like, if you keep winning, like, you're ultimately going to be the team that has the best resume and therefore is arguably the most deserving champion.
Because there are arguments to be made in the past that the most deserving team did not win the championship before the playoffs. And so there's no doubt that whoever comes out will have earned it, even if they come from the Conference USA or whatever. They're going to have to prove themselves, and they will. So, all right. Thank you all. That will do it for this show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Reminder to check out BuckeyesScoop.com for all of your Ohio State needs. And I think that'll do it. We will talk to you guys next week.